Hello, everyone. Thank you for your company and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Alan Misterino, Superintendent of Schools for the Alvord Unified School District. And today we have Teaching Royalty with us. We have the three Teacher of the Year finalists for the County Department of Education. And we also have this year's Best Award winner, teacher from Norte Vista. So let me start off by introducing our teachers. Then I'll go ahead and introduce some others who are here visiting today as well. So first of all, from Lake Hills Lake Hills Elementary School, we have Candace Wynn. Candace, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. So honored to be here.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. From Wells Middle School, Lydia Song. Lydia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And well, it's a pleasure to have you here. From McAuliffe Elementary School, we have Sharon Bennett. Sharon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. And again, I will reiterate, I am so excited to be here this evening. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. And from Norte Vista High School, Allison Barron. Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we are absolutely delighted to be amongst Teaching Royalty today. And we also have the principals from the very schools that I just mentioned. So from Lake Hills Elementary School, we have Carrie Mont. Carrie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
From Wells Middle School, we have Karen Rabato. Karen, welcome.
Hi there. Thank you very much.
From McAuliffe Elementary School, we have Gerardo Aguilar. Gerardo, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
And from Norte Vista High School, we have Jason Marquez. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we also have our Director of Elementary Education from Education Services, Dr. Emily Devore. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to begin with our teachers. So first of all, Candace, let's start with you. In a word, describe what the experience has been like thus far since school closure and talk a little bit about what that experience has been all about.
Yeah, so I pick communication and also connection. Those are my two standout words because I think that is what kind of has driven my distance learning program and has driven my students to continue and my parents to stay engaged. And although we are distant learning, they are still engaged with me. And we used to do something on Monday mornings where they would come in and they would share something from the weekend that was of importance to them. And so I've continued that, and it was something that was really special time for us. And so during our Zooms, I talk to each student and they get to share out one thing that they did for the weekend that was special to them. And keeping those connections and that communication open with the families has been a really important aspect of making distance learning successful for me and for my students and their families. So I'm thankful to have technology that has allowed me to do that, like Google Classroom, Zoom, Class Tag, email, phone, all those things. So I'm just, it's overwhelming, but it has been a learning experience.
Well, thank you for that, Candace. And of course, consistency is a challenge as well as connectivity during this time. But okay, let's move on to Lydia. Lydia, in one word, describe what best describes your experience thus far.
It's been a little bit unsettling because life is just not normal. I want to see my kids every day and I can't. And I want to be able to talk to them. I want to encourage them. They're 8th graders. So it's like, come on, we've got to do this. Let's go, let's go. So that's been kind of unsettling. But learning to figure out ways to talk to them. And, you know, texting is their language. So sometimes it's texting at 12 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever works for them, and finding ways to encourage them. And I think that part I really actually appreciate because the things that I can say in text stays. So if they want to go back to it and they feel down or something and I've said something, they can read it again. So that part makes me feel like, okay, that's okay. Then I'm going to say more. I'll say more and I'll say more and I'll say more. And hopefully the message will get through that we can all do this and that they have to believe in themselves.
Well, what a great message that is. I know that when my own children were high school age and beyond, texting was the only way we communicate. Even when we were upstairs and downstairs, it would be a text to come down for dinner. So good to hear that you're taking advantage of that, because you're right, the text stays and it resonates, and you would hope that it would resonate with the children instead of one in one ear and out the other. Sharon, what about you?
Oh, I have several words, but I'm going to pick one, and that's the true meaning of differentiation. When working with kids in the classroom, you're used to doing different things for different kids for different purposes and whatnot. And distance learning has kind of made me aware that every family is different, every child is so different, their access is different to technology, their understanding of technology is different, their support at home with technology is different, and really being willing to say, you know, I'm going to have several different ways of having kids demonstrate what they know. I'm going to have several different ways of them turning it in. Some of them text it to me, some of them email it to me, some of them are going to bring it to me when they see me again, you know, just so I can look at their work and make a judgment call on it. And you just have to be okay with doing things different. As my mom always says, we're going to treat everyone the same, which is differently. And this experience has really taught me that that is so true. You have to look for ways to reach every different child, even if it's not the same as the next child.
Right. And that's what you all do all the time, whether you're distant teaching or not. That's why you're Teachers of the Year. So thank you for that, Sharon. Allison, what about your word and your experience?
Shocking and chaotic. We found out on Friday the 13th during sixth period. We thought it was only going to be for a couple weeks, and then it was extended. The first couple weeks, I gave my students some book work. I was real lucky with my English language learners. They had a novel at home and a big packet I had copied. We were preparing for the SBAC. So they had book work. Technology is not a luxury. It is a necessity. And I was very thankful that I had used Remind with my students. So I text them a lot. And I also use Google Classroom and do Zoom meetings. It was kind of funny. My watch kept going off. One of my students just got a job at Taco Bell. So she just, a senior, texted me, "Yippee, I got the job at Taco Bell. Thank you for being my reference." So like Candace said, I really, really miss my students, and they send me pictures. They cut their hair and they dyed it and they got jobs, and they share these things with me. So it's changed so much, but there are still like small glimpses of positivity.
Yeah, and you might have to look a little deeper for it, but I think you all have really identified the personal relationships. It seems as though it's an opportunity to engage on a more personal level with your students, even though perhaps it might not be with every one of them. It seems as though it's really very personal to be in people's homes, because you are remotely in their homes. It's all very, very different, as Sharon really coined that, because differentiation, all the D word that really drives a lot of what we do, is becoming crystal clear as you really get to know your kids on a personal level. Okay, Eric, did you say that?
Yeah, we have a couple of extra participants.
We do. How many?
It's like 4 of them.
Oh, we do. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and let our special guests in?
All right.
Well, let's see what we have here. Stephen Light, are you here?
Yes.
Well, Stephen, hello. This is Dr. Musarino. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. Is that a cat behind you? Oh, we're going to get our cat video. Anytime you could add a cat to a podcast, you're in good show. Thank you for that. Stephen, welcome, and hold on a second here. Let's see. Lizette, are you here? Aguilar? Hello, Lizette. You may be muted.
Hello.
There you are. Hi, Lizette.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm
you.
Dr. Muserino. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And we have a special surprise here for our teacher. I think they just figured it out. Let's see. How about Juana? Juana Esteban Diego. Juana, are you here? I think she's still connecting. Oh, there you are. Hi, Juana. I'm Dr. Muserino. Nice to see you. God, look at these beautiful smiles. Every time we have kids and we have students every week in the podcast, it makes you miss things even more. And let's see, we also we're waiting for Brian Molina. Brian, are you here?
Yes.
Brian, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing great, thank you. Let's see you. Can we see your video too? Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, we'll wait for Brian to come on so we could all see him as well. Well, students, thank you for joining us today. And teachers, we conspired to do this. We wanted to have your students here today to talk about you, because it's students that we're all about in Alvord, and that's why we all signed up for what we do. So we thought there'd be no better way to celebrate your honor than to have your students here. There's Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
There we go. Let me close this out. All right, Brian, welcome. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to go to to our principals. And we're going to talk a little bit about our Teachers of the Year. And we have 4 of them here in the podcast today, our 3 finalists for the County Teacher of the Year and the 2020 Best Award winner, Teacher of the Year. So we're going to talk a little bit about them from an administrative perspective. As a principal myself for 17 years, my life was all about teachers and students. It still is as a superintendent of schools. But as a principal, you obviously rely so much on your teachers to extend what it is that you're trying to create and what you're trying to achieve as a school. So, Carrie, let's start with you. We have Carrie Mont from Lake Hills Elementary School.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Barron. Nice to see you, and Mrs. Wynn as well, and everybody else. Congratulations. Mrs. Wynn, I could go on and on and on, but our podcast is not long enough for me to explain all of the reasons that she was selected as the Lake Hills Teacher of the Year, but she's inspiring. She's amazing. She's passionate. She's a relationship builder. She's innovative. And as we mentioned before, I think Allison said that we left school on Friday the 13th, and we thought we were only going to be gone for a couple of weeks. And here we are a couple of months later. And Candace has really taken distance learning very seriously. She's taken it to another level. She's been innovative. She's creative. She's really supported her team and other team members on our school site. And that was one of the many reasons that our fellow colleagues at Lake Hills chose her to represent Lake Hills this year. You can see it in everything that she does. She's all in 100%, and she uses her heart with everything that she does. So congratulations.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Mont. Brian, what do you have to say about your teacher? Unmute. There you go.
Mrs. Wynn, congratulations for getting this awesome award. I'm honored to get the opportunity to be here with you today. I just want you to know that you're a huge role model to me and many others. You engage, inspire, and empower your students every day to do their best, which is something I'll always value. I really enjoyed my last year with you, especially when you asked me to go over some math problems with the class. It was like the highlight of my week. The confidence you had in me that moment made me realize I'm no longer a little boy. I'm ready to move on up. Thank you for everything and congratulations.
Oh my gosh, Brian.
Brian, that was
That was beautiful.
to say the least. You're moving on to the 6th grade, moving on to middle school, a big transition, and without teachers like Mrs. Wynn and principals like Mrs. Mont, not to mention all your other teachers. I bet you feel like you're well prepared for middle school.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you write and speak beautifully. We know that. We just learned that. Miss Wynn, can you talk, or
I
you
can
like
talk. I'm good.
You're humbled by that.
I definitely am. Brian, I've had the joy of having you for 2 years, 4th and 5th grade. And both years, I just watched you grow in so many ways and mature. And I am so proud of the young man that you are turning into. And I know that you're going to do great things in this world because I've seen it. And I hope that you'll come back and visit me and say hi and share with me your accomplishments and share with me things that you do as you move on in your life. So thank you. I'm humbled, and those were some amazing, kind words. So thank you.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but Brian, happy birthday. Thank you for taking your birthday.
Well, okay, everyone, you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brian. Happy birthday to you. Woo-hoo-hoo, yeah. Well, you're very welcome, Brian. And hang around so you could listen to what everyone else has to say about their teacher as well. So sit tight for a little bit. Let's go on to Wells Middle School. Mrs. Roboto.
All right. Well, it is my joy to have Lydia and Lizette here. They're quite a team together. But one of the things that makes Mrs. Song such a great math teacher is she's not a math teacher. And I don't know how to explain what she does, but when you go in her classroom, you have to be really good at listening, because what Mrs. Song does is she asks questions because she wants to know what her students are thinking. And I think the moment that moved me about Miss Song is when I heard her hear a student say that they're not good at math. And that's taboo. You don't say that in Mrs. Song's class. And what she said is that, no, you are good at math. You just haven't found the right teacher to help you understand how your brain does math. And so that's what Mrs. Song does, is she honors student voice. She wants to hear all the different ways that students do math, just like she shared that she wants to hear the ways that students want to communicate. If they want to text, then she'll text. If they want to do math a certain way and it ends up with the right answer, then that's what she's going to honor. I also like that she encourages students to challenge other people's thinking in respectful ways. I was in her class hanging out one day, and we ended up talking about dress code and kind of the social justice or social injustices of dress codes as they relate to specific genders. And so Mrs. Song just cares so deeply about developing her kiddos as people. And somehow they end up learning a whole lot of math too. But she's a magician in her class, and if I could clone her, I would. And she just cares so deeply for every single one of her students. I'm sure she wishes she could have more Lizettes in her class, just like I wish I could have more Lizettes on campus and more Mrs. Songs as teachers.
Well, beautifully said, Karen. Thank you for that. And Lizette, what about you? What's your experience been like with Mrs. Song?
Well, it all starts off with entering the classroom with a smile on her face and a pat on the back. Questions are answered as fast as possible as she can, on her mind, no matter what time of day. She always helps in other classes. It doesn't necessarily have to be math. She's always there for us. Her positivity and encouragement brightens every student's day, even not on a bad day. Her patience throughout the year made math haters love math and math lovers love it even more. A quote that I found that stood out to me was, "A teacher is a compass that activates the magnets of curiosity, knowledge, and wisdom in students," by Edward Garrison. This is true because I see it when Mrs. Song teaches. After a lesson, questions are asked by many students about what could happen if this part of a math problem was different, or what if this never happened to this event. Because of these questions, the curiosity knowledge keeps extending. That's what makes Mrs. Song's class go by fast. I also see her as a school mom because she acts like one. She always makes students feel special when they're around her, and I think she would be the most perfect teacher that best fits the recognition for Teacher of the Year.
Well, thank you, Lizette. Beautifully said. My gosh, that was absolutely wonderful. And Ms. Song, we're going to go to you now for just some concluding remarks about what you've just heard.
It's hard. I didn't expect to see my students. Thank you, Lizette, and thank you, Karen. Just that's really one of the hardest things with this being on quarantine. Every time I see my kids, I cry. So it just, I had to, anyways. But I really do thank you. It's been so, Lizette especially, your questions, they always push me, always make me think, and it always is something I'm sure is on someone else's mind too. And I always say, please ask more questions because that's what makes me a better teacher. I can't do this without you guys. And I learn from you as much as you say you learn from me. It's our journey together. So thank you so much. And the biggest regret of this year is I didn't get to have you in class on a day-to-day basis the whole year. So I don't know what to do about that one.
Well, thank you, Lydia. Gerardo Aguilar, what about Mrs. Bennett?
Wow, Dr. Bennett, she is just a wealth of just knowledge, wisdom, leadership. I can go on and on. She's just an amazing person. I'll start off with a couple things here. Dr. Bennett was really worked with Dr. Sandra Kaplan through the Gifted program out through USC. She got her doctorate through USC and worked closely with a lot of the professors there in the Department of Education and at USC. And she's brought that knowledge not just to our students and the students that she teaches, but also to the staff, and also has been part of training staff members through PD that we've had here at the district. She just has just an innate ability to really connect well with all of our students and really brings to light sometimes inequities, sometimes people that might be marginalized, some of our kids sometimes, and sometimes we don't want to see that, but Dr. Bennett points it out. And sometimes, she does it for the good of the child, for the good of whatever systematic thing we might see that's just not right. And sometimes, she has done some of the things that were difficult because it's difficult to do the right thing at times, but Dr. Bennett does. And she is just an advocate for our kids and also for our parents. She's led some of the parents in regards to doing some education in regards to the Gifted program and what it means to be a gifted child and some of the nuances that come along with being gifted. And she's also been a mentor teacher to other prospective teachers that will be coming down the road through UCR and Cal Baptist. So we want to thank her for her hard work. And she's just an amazing person. One last thing, she saved the day for me not too long ago with our what we call our virtual pink and blue system. What it is that we move kids from, say, first grade up to second grade and we place them in classrooms. Well, we all did that paper pencil for many years. Well, we couldn't this year, so we had to go to a virtual 2.0 version. Dr. Bennett was very instrumental in having that happen and developing the format for that, as well as developing a tutorial video for our teachers to watch and learn how to do that system, along with another of our teachers that she worked with. So she's just always jumps in, there to help, and is always there for the kids and parents. So thank you, Sharon, from the bottom of my heart. Well deserved.
And Dr. Bennett, we have one of your students here, and that's Stephen Light. Stephen, what do you have to say?
To be honest, I'm kind of speechless. Dr. She's the type of person who always cares about you when you're either having trouble or if you're just stuck on something. Like, there's this nail on the board that stops you from walking. Dr. Bennett cuts the nail off and lets you walk freely for the rest of your life. And that's just what she like elementary. After all these hard times, everything that's happening right now, ventilators, we need people like Dr. Bennett in this world. Someone who helps other people instead of looking at herself first. These people are people who we need right now. This is Dr. Bennett, and she is one of the most amazing teachers in the world.
Well, no one's going to argue with that, that's for sure. I was thinking the three students so far ought to be doing this podcast instead of just being a guest on it. How incredibly articulate, and my gosh, just powerful words. Dr. Bennett, any way to follow that up? You're muted. There you go.
I'm not sure how to follow that up. Both Mr. Aguilar, you've been a support from the very beginning, and I just thank you for just letting me grow and for letting me go and for listening to all my crazy wackadoodle ideas. And some of them actually work, and I just thank you for your kind words today. That just meant so much. And Stephen, you being here, you are everything that is important about me being as a teacher. Everything about you. And I just want you to know that I'm especially happy with you saying the words you did. You are amazing, and you come to every one of my Zoom sessions. You're participating, you're excited about learning and whatnot. You are an example of what a person should be on this earth as well. So I guess we're going to be that example together. Thank you, Stephen. I'm just moved. I'm moved. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Well, well deserved, Dr. Bennett. So again, we could not have said what's been said so far better than the students. Now we also have our best award teacher of the year, Allison Barron, here. So Mr. Marquez, principal of Norte Vista High School.
Thank you again for having me here. Miss Barron, being a teacher is obviously a difficult profession. And what I respect with Miss Barron is she shows up every day and is all about the students. From the starting bell to the ending bell, she's all about the students. She's professional. She's very calm in her demeanor. Whenever I'm in her class, her demeanor just seems to influence or does influence the classroom, and the students are calm and everyone's busy. And there's no disruption. It just seems to rub off. And so, she is that role model for those students. She never stops fighting for the students. I can tell you, she's always asking me, Mr. Marquez, this is what I need next. Mr. Marquez, if you want me to do this for these kids, this is what I need. And I found this. And so I appreciate that. Even though some may look at it as I'm bugging him, it's not that, because I know she has her students' interest in her mind from the start of the day to the end of the day. And even probably when she goes home, she's thinking of these things. So I appreciate that. And that lets me know, makes me work even harder on how I can support her, because I know she's doing her best to support our students. And so, I truly appreciate it. She has some challenging classes, but she does not just her best, as in the award, but above that. And with her Sheltered English 3, as Juana will jump in here in a second, she's done amazing with that group and has really taken it under her wing and made those kids prosper. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Miss Barron, for all you do for Norte Vista, for the students, for the community. So well-deserved. Thank you very much, Miss Barron.
Well, thank you, Mr. Marquez. Now, we have Juana Esteban Diego. Now, Juana, I understand you've been in the country for 2 years, and here you are joining us for this podcast. We're so happy and delighted that you're here to join us. So tell us about your experience with Mrs. Barron.
Miss Barron is a special teacher. She teaches her class in a unique way because she is always motivating us every day to be better and to push ourselves with the assignments. Academically, Miss Barron has helped me overcome to fear I have to speak English with other people, and she makes us practice with one another so that we can improve and not feel afraid. During the time I've been in her class, she's helped me improve my writing and my pronunciation. And now I understand much better and I can express myself without fear when speaking to others. And first of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Barron for all the effort she has put into us so that we can learn. And thanks to her, I've been able to improve academically and overcome several obstacles that often stop us from communicating and interaction with other people. Thank you, Ms. Barron, and congratulations.
Juana, besides your $1 million smile, you articulate beautifully. Your pronunciation is beautiful. Miss Barron has done a wonderful job, and also doesn't seem to be any fear either. Here you are on a podcast with a bunch of other people, and you just do it. So thank you so much for saying what you just said. We're going to go back to Miss Barron. Miss Barron, that was incredible.
Thank you so much, Juana. I really appreciate it. I miss you so much, and I miss your sass. Juana is tiny but sassy, and she would whip her group into working, and her English got better throughout the year. She would just talk and talk more in English, and her academic English has improved so much, and I'm so proud of you. And this means the world to me that you came on this podcast and you spoke English to everyone so articulately. So thank you very much. You made my eyes water, and you know I never cry. And Mr. Marquez, thank you for always answering my emails, not trying to escape me when you come into the classroom and I ask you for questions, and I ask you things that I need for my students to be successful. It's all about the students, what I can do to make my students be successful. Thank you for the support.
Well, thank you, Allison. I think we all have learned why or what it takes to become a teacher of the year. Certainly touching your children in ways that have a long-lasting impact, well beyond mathematics, language arts, and social sciences and science. So thank you, students, for joining us today. I know that you made all of your teachers' day. You certainly made our day and your principal's day, certainly. So you be well, be healthy. We're going to continue to serve you and ensure that you're going to continue to get an education as we go through this very, very difficult period, as Stephen articulated so well. It's a great challenge we have on our hands right now, but we're going to continue to work towards solutions, and we will get through this. And when we do, we will come out the other end and be better because of it. So students, thank you all for joining us today, and you are all dismissed.
Right. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for coming on.
Welcome. I have one more
Thank you,
thing.
Stephen. Oh,
Go on, Stephen.
go for it. Bye, Stephen.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
See you in group tomorrow.
Bye, Brian.
Bye, Brian. Bye, Lizette. Well, bye, Brian. How incredibly sweet. Wow. I don't know how you guys kept it together, teachers. You didn't really, but that's to be expected. That was incredibly touching. Wow. What?
Brian made everybody tear up. Brian,
I know, and
Brian
you're
was like,
just
Right. Right. Well, again, I don't know what better way to honor you than by having your students tell you what they think about you, because particularly what's going on these days here and the challenges you're facing since March 13th, it's really beyond what anyone could realistically expect it to do, and you're all continuing to do it. So very, very, very proud of you. Okay, we're going to now transition to the next part of the show. Oh, there goes Juana. Okay, I was just going to say bye, Juana. Okay, so the next segment here is going to be about next year. We've talked about this task force and the county task force. Our task force will begin once the county task force concludes. So we have all the information recommendations from them. That's next Friday. Then we'll begin to assemble our team. We have a steering committee called the COVID working group that we assembled back in March, and that group will continue as we begin the next step in this process, which is to identify task force members and create task force, likely much like the county level task force groups, to begin this process of preparing for this coming school year. Emily, you had something that you wanted to share.
All right, thank you, Dr. Musarino, for this opportunity to speak today regarding the Riverside County Office of Education Task Force that myself and 6 other Alvord community members are part of. I'm really excited to share this with you today, especially after we just heard from our teachers, principals, and students, and how imperative it is to get our schools back open and running in the safest way possible. So I'm going to share my screen with a little bit of information regarding this task force. This task force includes members from all 23 districts in the county, and we meet 3 times over the next couple of weeks, as Dr. Musarino shared. This task force includes members that have a number of talents, experiences, and perspectives to help support the overall objective of discussing, planning, and implementing actions needed for the opening of schools in Riverside County. The group is broken up into 8 subcommittees. These subcommittees include communication and public relations, focused on connecting the community to resources and organizations to support non-academic needs for members of the county. It includes curriculum and instruction, focused on ensuring the delivery of instruction aligned to rigor, state standards, assessment, and engagement. Business and operation is looking at how to ensure safety of students as related to social distancing, nutrition, and transportation. Student support is looking through the lens of what our students need during this time. The personnel and risk management team is looking at providing guidance on wages, hours, risk management, and communication protocols. Technology is focused on supporting devices for students, staff, and families, and also looking at the county internet infrastructure to support all communities within the county. Early learning and preschool support is focused on providing program options to the very youngest community members. And then policy and governance is made up of district board members on the operations and policies and decision making. In summary, these subcommittees will develop key focus areas, describe what the implementation may look like, and provide district tools or artifacts to support local decision making. This group hopes to provide districts within the county a guide in supporting Alvord's reopening plan.
Thank you, Dr. Devore. In addition to Emily, we have both presidents of our associations on the committee. We have 2 high school students on the committee. We have our chief facilities officer on the committee. We have our parent liaison on the committee as well. So we have broad representation and are looking forward to the recommendations. Now, the recommendations will be one of many sets of recommendations because obviously the state, California Department of Education, the state superintendent of instruction, the Centers for Disease Control, we will be receiving guidance from a variety of different sources. So what I would love to engage everyone in right now is just a discussion about what's on your mind as you start thinking about what next year might look like. I'd like to start with teachers. So teachers, think a little bit about it. If, let's say, for example, we were going to continue with distant learning or some hybrid version where perhaps students are eased back into school, which is what a lot of the talk has been thus far. Being able to have fewer students on campus at any given time, so social distancing could be practiced, which would be a great challenge on most campuses, obviously. But what might it look like? What are some of the things that you've been thinking about when August 10th comes? So who would like to start? Dr. Bennett.
Well, I know that a lot of people are concerned about, with the social distancing, having 30, 31 kids in a classroom. And, so I know that, the buzz is that there are going to be some families that that keep their kids at home, not just in our district, but just in general, that we may not see as many kids come back in the fall as we had in March. And some of my thoughts were with the hybrid is like when we're teaching, doing an instructional piece, actually doing some Zoom or some Google Meets as we're teaching. So, because the big thing that I learned about distance learning is that authentic teaching that you get when you're doing it live and having kids know, okay, math time's at 9 o'clock, Zoom in at 9 o'clock and get the instruction, have an opportunity to ask questions and to interact with other people in the class. And I think that would be a great place to start is, kids who don't come back and just come in for the instructional piece as part of the digital community, and they get to have that interaction as best as they can distance-wise, that is.
Right, and my guess is that whatever hybrid version we do implement next year is going to require every bit of what you're talking about, which is a formal structure, because as we know it now, what we offer is just that. It's offered, and we hope students take full advantage of it, but it would be very different come August if we're still utilizing a distant model. Other comments and anyone, teacher, principal, Dr. Devore, former principal, Dr. Devore. Allison.
I can jump. Oh, go ahead, Allison.
I would like to see the students held accountably grade-wise, so we have more buy-in. And I also agree with Dr. Bennett. It would have to be heavily structured. I'm going to be really honest. Right now, if I hold a Zoom meeting, I don't hold it till after 12 o'clock because a lot of my students are not awake. The first day of long distance learning, I tried to do something at 7:30 and nobody was there with me. So I learned that I have to do my lessons later in the day if I want to capture my audience and I want people to attend my Zoom meeting. So I would like to see student accountability. So I have buy-in, that they're going to get a grade for the assignments I give them and attending Zoom meetings. And then I also agree with Dr. Bennett, it's going to need to be structured so they know what time to log on to my Zoom meeting, and so I can go over the agenda and teach them what I'm going to teach them, what particular skill.
Right. Well, thank you, Allison. Well, no doubt that whatever model is implemented come August 10th, it will be structured, number one. And number two, it will include accountability because it's school. This, again, because of the transition, as you all know, students were held harmless for their grades based on the last reporting period before March 13th. And many students, of course, are not in a position to do school right now. School might be the least of their concerns for them and their families, given some of the challenges that many of our families have. So that was really why the decision was made at the state level, really, to recommend that all students are held harmless. But that will be very different come the fall. Who else would like to comment?
Yeah,
Yes, Miss Song. Oh, let's go. Yeah, Jason, you were going to go when Allison spoke. So yeah, go ahead. And then Lydia, we'll go on to you next. Go on, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, boss. So I was just going to say, especially at a high school, obviously, there's the academics, but there's also the cultural part, which the sports and the activities and all that. But first with the academics, whatever that hybrid model looks like, it can't be, we would assume and not want it to be less of an education for those students who maybe don't come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so they just don't think it's a day off while the other students are on campus. Whether we separate that by grade level or by alpha or however that looks in order to lessen, I guess, the foot traffic on campus on any given day. There's that piece, but then, the biggest comments and emails I get from parents and students right now are, well, what about all the activities? Because that is a big part of any high school, from prom to homecoming to everything. So, we'll have to consider that too, and not just ignore it, because that's just a big part of students going through 4 years of high school.
Well, yeah, it certainly is. And we had Rob Wygod, the commissioner of the CIF Southern Section, on a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how there will not be sports likely until phase 4, long into the calendar year, that most sports will probably be condensed into shorter seasons so they could have them all at least. But obviously we heard students. That's what school is, right? We heard students in classrooms, we heard them in assemblies, we heard them into the lunchroom. Children are herded. How do you keep them safe given those circumstances? And of course, in the sports, on the sports field, on the courts of fields of play, it's impossible to keep social distance. And so that's amongst the challenges that high schools face without having activities. And that's, of course, every school, but high school, yeah, it's fall and football, Friday night lights, right? To not have that certainly takes away from the culture and the experience for our high school students. Lydia?
One thing I'm actually kind of excited about looking forward to next year is some of the things that I've learned about students in this time. I have some students who aren't always very motivated, and sometimes I think they're afraid to do more. And so when we've been online, it's given them the opportunity to kind of do it invisibly and not in front of others. So they've had a chance to find some passion and do excel when maybe they don't necessarily want to show that amongst their peers. So that's been kind of interesting to find out. And so thinking about, as we go on, move on, how can I integrate that better in my classroom, whether we're there on the ground every day or whether we do some kind of a hybrid model, to capitalize on that, because I think that's going to get them just to do even a little bit more and to succeed. So I'm kind of excited about that, to be honest.
Well, that's a great point. You know, the profile of the online learner is very different than the brick and mortar learner, and many children are in a much better space when they are alone, although they're still with their fellow students. So there's no doubt that there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. We're also going to be faced with the challenge of many of our children with disabilities, particularly those who have missed out on the opportunity to improve their social skills over the course of who knows how long it'll be when they come back. Just today, I was reading about children with autism who were quite comfortable at home with mom and dad and love the fact that they're being homeschooled. And the parents were talking about the challenge it's going to be when they have to go back to school, another transition, which already is very, very challenging. We really don't know what to expect exactly to when we resume school. We do not know exactly what trauma that many of our children may have been facing. We don't know about the impact of unemployment and other things, illness that may impact them. So how do we get them ready to learn? So it seems as though, well, we're always talking about the pyramid as relates to interventions and content. I think it's more like Maslow's hierarchy that we have to be more concerned about as far as that pyramid is concerned, to really think about the needs of our children so that they're in a position to learn. So when we create this new model come August, what will we have in place to ensure that the students that are going to need more than just the academic side, much more than usual, how we're going to be able to meet those needs? I thought someone else had a hand up. Was going to, Dr. Devore.
Yeah, hi. Being on the task force really is sharing the fact that the county is going to provide us guidance in regards to some parameters around those 8 subcommittees that I shared with you. But what it isn't providing is really the practical systems that we have to put in place as a district. The reason why they're not providing those specifics is because every district is different, right? Our needs here in this more urban district is much different than maybe Coachella Valley, or that has more of a rural and internet infrastructure issue. So their needs are different, and so they have to consider their systems differently. So I think I know what we need to do as a district is, as Dr. Musarino shared, is develop those task force at our level as well. But even within that task force, differentiating between the different levels. We heard from Allison in regards to getting up at 7:30 for a class versus 12 o'clock for a class, whatever it may be. We hear from Miss Song in regards to some middle school experiences as well. One of the subcommittees is that early learning group, and they're speaking a lot about preschool and those type of opportunities. But as the director of elementary education, one of my biggest concerns is our elementary littles. And I'd love to hear from our elementary team here, because how do you address a first opportunity of experience of school for, let's talk about our TK, they're 4 and maybe 5 years old. How do you address that distance learning potentially becoming their first experience with school? And how do we navigate that? Can we navigate that? What are our options with our smallest of students? So that's why I think, in addition to the Riverside Task Force, we need an Alvord Task Force that includes subcommittees that address the elementary needs that are different than middle school, that are different than high school. And so I'd love to just kind of hear people's feedback in that regard.
Yeah, well, those are great points. So you think about a incoming student who's having their first experience in school, and it's going to be quite different than what everyone a year older than them and above had experienced, um, and how we will be able to support the parents as well throughout this challenge. Those who have to go back to work, those who will need to go back to work. So there's a lot of pressures, economic pressures, not to mention, of course, learning loss, which we're all concerned about. But I think we would be short-sighted to think that we have to recover that in a short period of time, because it'll be up to 6 months worth. Even the most conservative estimates from experts is that it'll be more like 6 months worth of loss this year. And that's not something we're going to recover quickly. So we cannot think short term. We really have to look at a long range plan. Candace, you had your hand raised like a good student.
Yeah, when Dr. Devore was talking, it just kind of made me think about the elementary and the, yes, the TK kinder, what does that look like? And even up to 5th grade, like I was talking with the teacher today actually about how are we going to teach them to get on Google Classroom distantly, because that's when we started this whole thing, they knew how to, my 5th graders, they knew how to go on because we had done it at school together. But how does that look in distance learning? How do I teach them how to do it when I can't be there with them and support them? And so those are kind of some questions that have been brought up. And then with the littles, how do you, that social aspect of developing that interaction of sharing and, just all of the things, getting in line and walking in line and all of those things that come along with elementary school and those foundational skills, how are we going to get that in distance learning?
Right. Well, it's a great point. Obviously we're not going to probably in the distant learning piece, which means when students come back, the children come back, more time will need to be spent probably with some of those elements, which take away from instructional time. Mrs. Mont, I believe your hand was raised.
Yeah, Mrs. Wynn took some of the words out of my mouth, but one of the biggest pieces along with the academics that our kids are missing out on, and it's frightening to know that our kids are going to lose approximately 6 months of their education, and we as educators need to do everything in our power to continue to chug along and support all of our students and get them to their grade level standards. But a huge piece is the social emotional piece, and our kids are lacking that. They're at home and they might be Zooming here and there or on their Google Meet, but they're not continuing that relationship and the face-to-face interactions with adults and their peers. And we're seeing our kids really struggle just in the last couple of months. I would like to see the school year start with, as we're talking about, a blended type of learning where there is the face-to-face, because it's so important as an educator to build the relationship not only with the students, but as much as important to be with the parents. We're going to have to support our parents and teach them on what the expectations are to set them up for success to be able to support their children. But there's also the social aspect that they're missing not being at school. So the first couple of weeks, kids were kind of excited. My own kids were excited, but we don't have that routine anymore. We don't have all of the groundwork that we've built and we've strengthened over this time. It's kind of gone by the wayside with my own kids too. We need to get back to a structure. We need to have a routine to set our kids up for success, both socially, but also academically. And until we have that foundation, we're kind of floundering. So I would be very excited to be part of a task force to implement and roll out our plan of attack for August 10th so that we have successful scholars that we're supporting.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, well, the task force will, of course, include principals, teachers. It'll include all stakeholders. And we'll announce that in the next week. The task force at the county concludes next Friday. So the following Monday, that's when we will begin the process locally. Mr. Aguilar.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback a little bit of what Carrie said and others. the important piece too is that that blended model is important for, especially for our little ones, to connect with the teachers and the teachers in general to connect with the kids. Part of what we're seeing in regards to online instruction are two basic groups going on with instruction. You have those teachers that check in socially and get to see the kids and check on them and do some light activities. Then you have the group of teachers who are hardcore, online lessons, on directed instruction online. So you have those two pieces because there really isn't a lot of parameters because what has happened. So your teachers are trying their very best. Now, if we go to a more structured model with accountability, grades, and instruction, our teachers are going to need a little bit more guidance as to how to establish more routines and structure on an online platform, because you're not having a lot of understanding how that is established. And I think Ms. Nguyen touched on it a little bit, is that face-to-face and establishing those norms and those expectations in front of the kids, with what Dr. Bennett did mention, with having that Google Meets or Zoom in the classroom and teaching them what's expected, saying, boys and girls, when you go home, this is what's expected. This is how you're going to do this. The other part too that we're missing is parent education. Parents also need to be taught and to help us out really as an extended hand to redirect their students when they're not, or their children when they're not paying attention. I've taken a couple snapshot views at some of the instruction going on the other end with kids paying attention, and you have kids that are very attentive, listening, taking notes, and then you have from the other gamut with kids are spinning around in their chairs and doing backflips and things like that. So that's where we need the parents to step in to kind of redirect the kids, because we as teachers we can say something, but sometimes the parents have to kind of step in and move them back into the camera and to refocus. So there are a lot of little pieces like that have to happen. And again, like Carrie did say, our kids need to connect emotionally because they are really missing that part. We got kids falling into depression or semi-depression because they don't get to see their friends and interact. And they're just home after that computer shut down. They're just home with nothing much to do.
Well, it's a great point. Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. We just last week at our board meeting approved a new position of parent liaison, and that person is also on the committee that I just mentioned with Dr. Devore, the last member of that committee. And his responsibility will be to do exactly as you were speaking of, Mr. Aguilar, to work closely with parents to ensure that they have the tools that they need. But of course, the challenge will be, are they able to remain home if in fact the COVID timeline does not fit into our plans to open school on August 10th with children there? Because make no mistake about it, we will be driven by that timeline. So we will make all the plans that we can, which will include every possible contingency. But we still will be guided by exactly what condition we are in come August 10th. Now, there's also been discussion about a hybrid, as if we were going to half the school so that you have the at least possibility of creating social distancing, perhaps 12, 13 in a classroom instead of the usual 30 or so. So half your children are home, half your children there at school. How do you get your head around that, particularly teachers in this case? What might that look like? What are the kids who are home doing while you're with the kids that are there that day? What do you see that becoming? Candace?
Yeah, actually, Mrs. Mont and I kind of had a talk about this and how this could actually, having like a half and half kind of type thing would actually be kind of nice, because it would be a smaller group to work with, and then you could have that face-to-face instruction, and you could, target some specific skills with that smaller group of students, and then get them set up to go home. And then when they go home, they have some things to work on, and then the other group comes and you work on things with that group. So in a way, I like the idea of that model, because it does give that balance of a little bit of face-to-face and a little bit of online, and the smaller group size.
Well, yeah, it's a great point. The question that comes to mind when children are there half the time, typically, assuming that when they're home, they're doing the best they can, do we have to look at essential learnings per grade level, per course? Realistically, let's say we had 90 hours of instruction that we believe we could rely on. What would be essential that we want our children to learn? Which is why earlier I talked about looking at this over 2 years at least, so that we could be realistic. Because as excited as we all are going to be when we come back, there's a lot of realities that could set us back as well. If in fact there was a outbreak or even a single case, schools would be expected to shut down and quarantine for a couple of weeks and then reopen. So any plans to reopen will include closing and reopening as well. And of course, that's 90 days away practically. So things could very well change as far as that protocol is concerned. But that happens to be the protocol today. Of course, there are schools that are now starting to reopen, particularly nearby us, because we do have some year-round schools in our community that are beginning within the next month. And that'll be all distant learning at this point. So we'll also have some examples of it in place too by the time we start. So the task force that we'll have locally will collect guidance from all of the many recommenders that are out there, all the experts, but also some real-time examples of what's currently happening. But I also expect that we will put our collective heads together and the bright minds that we have here in this podcast today to come up with a model that is going to help our students where they need it most. I was always struck by an early mentor of mine who taught in a one school classroom building, and she worked with children of all ages, most of whom had been who didn't fit into the traditional school setting, and they ranged in age from 12 to 18. And I asked her, well, what does she teach them? And she said, what they don't know. I was struck by the profound nature of that reply, because that's really where we are now. We have to assess, determine where our kids are. We talked a lot about differentiation as if it's something we're just going to do. We're going to have great challenges with what's already a very, very difficult challenge to differentiate. Plus, our students will not be coming ready to learn in a lot of cases, although many, many will be anxious and quite ready to learn. Others are going to have a transition back to school. So teaching them what they don't know requires assessment and really getting that piece in place. I'm happy that we also approved a new position for assessment earlier in the year so that we could move forward with that, because it seems to me that whatever model we utilize, we're going to have to really divide our students based on need, and do that in such a way that we're able to help our learners who are pretty much where they're supposed to be to continue to grow, but really focus as well with teams. It's classified employee week, and many of our paraprofessionals, many of our aides and support personnel from the classified ranks, I expect will be part of these teacher and grade level teams to work with cohorts of students that we identify by virtue of where they are as learners. So I think differentiation is going to take on an entirely new meaning under these circumstances. I think someone else had there. Yes, Karen Urbato.
Thank you. So much to consider. I really appreciate that Mr. Aguilar was talking about teacher support, because I think it's a real shift. Some of our rockstar teachers who have kind of figured out what works in the classroom are now realizing that what worked in the classroom doesn't work online. And so I think we need to respect our teachers as learners also and support them in figuring out what does work. I also really love that we have students on our task force representing Alvord, because I think our students are the ones who are going to unlock how we do this the right way. We have less disciplined things to take care of at school, right? But one of the things that we had to take care of right away was that we had some kiddos, sixth graders actually, who decided to use a Google Meet code to stay on the code for an hour after the teacher was no longer a part of it, and they had a full-on like talk show, and they brought in guests, and it was a lot like your podcast, Dr. Booster. They were interviewing people, and we talk about students not wanting to be engaged and not wanting to be on task, and they engage themselves in themselves in this intricate weaving in and out of different topics, and the Q&A, and what was funny, and the editing, and I think that was a great opportunity for us to see that if students become the drivers of what education could look like, I think this is a really tremendous opportunity for us to make kind of a monumental shift in how we teach in a quicker fashion that we might be able to if we stuck to our typical bell schedule and day. I also appreciated, Dr. Musarino, that you brought up the one-room schoolhouse, because we're limited right now by grade level classrooms and by the 6-period day. And
okay, we'll wait for Karen to come back and finish the thought. The idea that students got into the Google Meet room and were engaging in ways that perhaps normally wouldn't have the opportunity to do in a lot of classes. So there's no doubt that our students are technologically advanced and digital natives, as we know, and perhaps this opportunity that they've had to now engage on a different level has been a great thing for many of them. When we have students, which we have every week in the podcast pretty much, they all miss school. They all miss socialization. They miss being with their friends, but they also love the freedom that they have to learn in ways that suit them, and have been clear that they expect whatever happens moving forward to be different than what it was. So no one expects when we return in August for it to be like it was. It won't. Nothing will ever be like it was. And so much to mourn there on one level, but on another level, as Karen was talking about, as most of you shared, it is a great opportunity to reinvent what we do. The model we use is still antiquated for the most part, and if not for great teaching and great leadership, it wouldn't have the impact that it has. But we still know many children are left behind. We certainly know that COVID has really shown the light on inequities to the point where we have to do something different. We just cannot return to that same model. So hopefully we will be in a place come August where we are ready to look at doing things differently in the interests of our students. Dr. Devore.
And just for the sake of some final thoughts that I was thinking about while everyone was sharing their experience and thoughts, I think we talk a lot about the students that are going to have a learning gap and students that may struggle upon their return. Let us make sure we also keep in mind those students who are actually thriving in this landscape. There are students who are learning well in this distance learning and are finding their voice differently than they weren't able to find in the traditional classroom. And so there are success stories out there that students are being successful. How do we support them in the integration back to a social setting in which was maybe more difficult for them. And they're finding this to actually be better, right? So something that we need to think about for our students. And then just my last thought was kind of what you were saying as well, Dr. Muserino. If the closures and COVID have taught us quite a number of things globally, not just in education, but I think what it's really taught me is we are able to remove barriers more than we thought. We use excuses a lot of why we can't do this, that, or the other. But this experience has really shown us we are able to remove barriers when we come together and we don't allow those excuses to provide us defeat. But instead, we treat them as challenges and we get them out of the way and we push forward. So those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Devore. Would anyone else like to make any comments before we sign off for this week's podcast? Anyone? Okay, well, thank you all. First of all, congratulations to our Teachers of the Year who are moving on to finalists at the county level. That's Dr. Sharon Bennett from McAuliffe, Mrs. Candace Wynn from Lake Hills, and Mrs. Lydia Song from Wells Middle School. Congratulations to all three of you. And Mrs. Allison Barron, who was the Teacher of the Year for the BEST, which is a bilingual education support team system. And Allison, we had the awards last week for support personnel there, and I believe that we have one coming up for you as well in the near future. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mrs. Mott, Mr. Marquez, Mr. Aguilar, and Mrs. Roboto, who we lost. Her internet connection was lost, which is another issue, right, that you take for granted. We've learned a lot about connectivity. We've given out a lot of devices and hotspots, over 2,000 devices actually, and that'll also be critical when we move forward. If we're going to have a hybrid version, we have to have 100% connectivity. And this has also been one of the lights that, as I mentioned, has been shown on education. Many children don't have connectivity, and certainly not just Alvord. Alvord is in pretty good shape. Many districts have half of their families, particularly in rural school districts, who are totally disconnected. So I certainly recognize that despite the challenges that we're faced with a budget deficit that Governor Newsom shared last week. Oh, Karen's back. Hi, Karen. We obviously have to do more with less as well, but I'm confident we could do that. Karen, you were in the midst of finishing your comment, and you were just talking about you were saying a blended model, and that's when we lost you. Do you want to finish your thought, or is that too long ago? Have you forgotten it?
You know, I think it's hilarious that we're talking about being successful with online platforms, and I get kicked off of the online platform.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't lost on us.
There's a lesson, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really hope we use this opportunity to hear from students for how they learn, and what we may think of as essential learnings may not be what those of us who've been in this education game for a while necessarily thought of as essential. You know, being successful in a COVID world requires a different skill set than maybe the standards that are assessed on a Common Core assessment. And I know I'm getting into, you know, some territory that maybe is non-traditional for educators to talk about, but I love the notion of looking at what our littles need, what our middles need, and what our Rockstar High School students need, especially from their perspective, so that they'll drive some of the learning. I think if we set things up that we're the drivers of the motivation, we're not going to have enough face time to take care of that motivation for them. So we need to tap into that student voice and that inner motivation, and see how we can empower our students to be the drivers of their education.
Well, absolutely. And we heard 4 voices today that were powerful, strong voices that obviously could provide us with tremendous information as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Drabato, for those comments. And Dr. Devore, right before Karen came back, you were closing your comments, and I too concur that there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this entire experience. So thank you all again for joining me this week. We will look forward to having you back again sometime and do a follow-up meeting. Thanks for your candidness. Thanks for being good sports, since we brought kids in here to make you cry, and we appreciate you all not being too mad at us for that, but we really thought that was the best way to honor you all as teachers. So thank you all for joining me, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Stay healthy and be well.
Thank you.
We really had fun here in the podcast today. I certainly had fun. Thank you, teachers, students, other staff that joined me today, principals, Dr. Devore, for that engaging conversation, talking about what the future holds for our students and our families as we look forward to school reopening scheduled at this time on August 10th. Congratulations to our Teachers of the Year, and also to all of our Teachers of the Year. Each school has a Teacher of the Year. The ones you met today are the ones that are moving on to the county level, and perhaps might become the Riverside County Teacher of the Year. We've had two of the County Teacher of the Years in the last 4 years in Alvord. So Alvord is well recognized for its outstanding teaching. Our students who joined us today shared why they believe that their teacher should be the Teacher of the Year, and they were all incredibly articulate and moving. It was very, very emotional, and just getting kids and teachers together to, obviously during this very, very difficult time, was moving. As we move forward, we will do so together as an organization, as a community. This week is Classified Employee Week, and I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to all of our employees, our classified employees, many who have been part of the essential workforce and on the front lines. I certainly have had an incredible experience getting to know many of you, more so than under normal conditions, since I've done my best to be out there with you all. And we're all so very, very proud of you and your work. On behalf of the Board of Education, we certainly want to wish you the best, not only on Classified Employee Appreciation Week, but of course all the time, and hope that all of you are well and that your families are well. In closing, we will continue the conversation about what next year looks like. Our task force at the county level concludes next Friday. We will then begin a process here locally with our Alvord schools and community to continue the work for planning for next year. And you could please look forward to participating. All of our families will have the opportunity to provide input, be members of task force, and provide their voices, the student voice, the parent voice, the teacher voice, the support staff voice, the community voice. All are critical to this decision. Obviously, opening schools impacts so many things and so many people. This is beyond learning, certainly beyond the scope of what our normal business operations are all about. But as a government agency, of course, we are very, very committed to support our community, our state, and our nation as we work our way through this unprecedented time in our history. So thank you for your company today, as always. We'll see you next week. Same Alvord place, same Alvord time. Bye for now.